Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and you are listening to the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am joined as always by John Sheeran. John, happy early Thanksgiving, my friend. You have had quite the week from what I understand, and I think some of our listeners who follow you on Twitter may also have heard a little bit about it. But how you doing, man? You hanging in there for the holiday?
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna. I've earned this Thanksgiving week. In the past 5 days, my house has been burglarized, and $1,500 worth of my possessions have been stolen, and I'm just recovering from the 48-hour flu. So I need Thanksgiving to happen, like now.
Wow. I didn't know about the second part of that. Hope you are feeling better. The good news is the holiday weekend is upon us. The year is almost done.
Thank God.
And hey, nothing but blue skies ahead, right?
It's pretty cloudy here in Cincinnati. I can't speak for the California weather.
It's actually pretty cold and rainy here today, believe it or not. So, yeah. Anyway, good to have you with us despite the circumstances. You look fantastic on that new computer you're rocking here. So glad you're able to.
Yeah, they didn't take Randall. I thought he would scare off the burglars, but he did not. But
what the hell do you think? What the hell do you think robbers were coming into your house if they see that thing? Were they going, what the?
You know what? I actually didn't have him hanging up behind me when I was gone. I had him on the couch. He was just chilling. So I guess they just thought he was just some dead dude. No, if he was here though, like they would have ran out scaring him for sure.
Yeah. Well, we've got a lot to get to tonight. We're going to talk about the Bengals switched at quarterback yet again back to Andy Dalton and talk a little bit about the Steelers' loss that caused that decision. So we will talk about that and a scenario in which possibly Dalton may or may not be the quarterback for the Bengals in 2020. We'll discuss that. We're going to be joined by MacGregor Wells of Gang Green Nation, the Jets website through the SB Nation Network. He's going to help us preview the upcoming game against the Jets. Kind of an interesting one for two teams that don't have a lot of wins between them. So we'll be talking with him in about 20 minutes or so. And then at the end, we're going to kick off our list of 2020 Prospect Watch. And I kind of joked a little bit with John before we took the air. You know, that's the main thing that Bengals fans pretty much have to look forward to at this point in 2019 is some of the guys that may or may not join the Bengals next year, excuse me. So just we'll talk about it when that segment starts too, but just a little preview of that. Basically, we're going to do a couple of things with that. John and I are going to select some people we've watched, some players we've watched at the college ranks that could be good fits for the Bengals in various rounds of the NFL draft. Give you a little bit of a profile in case you are unfamiliar with them. Others, maybe some that we have talked about at length, will be joined by other guests who have immediate insight to those players. So, for instance, we will be covering the big three quarterbacks of Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow, and helping us out will be various members of SB Nation sites for those respective schools that cover those teams. So it's not just going to be us talking about certain prospects. There'll be a little bit of that, but there's also going to be some interviews and us asking people who cover those teams on a weekly basis and see these types of players on a weekly basis. And we'll be doing that really kind of the rest of this year. And I assume we'll probably be doing that quite a bit leading up to the draft. So we're looking forward to that, and we hope you enjoy that too. We'll be ending the show with Prospect Watch, and we'll be doing listener questions this weekend as well, even though it's Thanksgiving. We're not going to be doing it Thursday, but we will be doing it either Friday or Saturday. We'll chat and get that information out to you. We've got a number of questions already queued up, so we'll get to that on a separate episode as well. Whew, a lot to get to, John. And as always, everybody can get the show iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. You can get it on iHeartRadio, Megaphone. You can get it on YouTube at cincyjungle.com. And we are streaming live on our Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel and the cincyjungle.com Facebook page. Whew. Well, John, let's get to it. I guess we could start with yet another loss to the Steelers. The umpteenth in a row, it seems like. Probably, I think it's dating back now to late 2015 that the Bengals have not beaten the Steelers. So another sweep this year. This one was pretty close. it was in some respects a good game and a fun game because it was competitive. The Bengals seemed to be playing with a high level of emotion and energy, and effort level was there, but talent level and of course at the quarterback position, the results were not there. Before we get to the quarterbacks, your take on the game itself.
Yeah, like it is true though. Like if any other quarterback in the NFL aside from Mason Rudolph or maybe Mitchell Trubisky was playing for the Bengals, that's probably a win for the Bengals. And it was smart for the Steelers to bench Mason Rudolph and put in Duck Hodges, who at least had some of a live arm in there, but like it was just depleting to watch this Bengals offense again. Like I know the pass protection was shoddy. I know that Joe Mixon didn't have that great of a game to start, but like all of Finley's struggles just kind of cultivated into one performance against a defense that knows how to toy with this offense. And Auden Tate had a decent game, but it was just so anemic. And honestly, you can understand the decision-making process of benching Finley after this, because you go into that locker room, at the end of the game with a lead, in the first half, and you're thinking to yourselves, what are we doing? Like as players and coaches whose job security is dependent upon wins, you're going into an 0-12 season. Like you can't sit there and say that this is a performance where we want to sit there, in the next press conference and lie to basically everything as to how Finley gives them the best chance to win, or Finley is the guy you feel confident about putting out there. So it was a performance where you just can't justify putting Finley back out there again. You just have to look at it from Zach Taylor's perspective. Okay, you're 0-11. It's the worst. You're 0-11. It's tied for the worst start in franchise history. Now you're 0-12, and you have a quarterback in there that you drafted in the 4th round who's playing like the absolute worst in the NFL. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is an organization where you're going to get the most job security out of basically anywhere else. And this is the only place where you can have a chance to fulfill whatever plan that you have for 4 or 5 years or whatnot. The only way that you get fired after this year is if you potentially go 0-16. And for Zach Taylor and his perspective, there's just not a chance that he can allow that to happen. So from his perspective, I understand why he made this choice, because obviously Andy Dalton gives him the best chance to win. Obviously, he's now the best quarterback that they have to evaluate the rest of the roster, and that's kind of backtracking, I guess, what we said 3 weeks ago when Dalton was benched and he was playing poorly. Finley may have given them the chance to evaluate the offensive line, the receiving core. Now that we know that Finley is absolute dog crap, we now know that Dalton gives them the best chance to do that. But also, when you look at the Bengals, they're 0-12. Again, worst start in franchise history. They're dead last in attendance. I think they're like officially 71% in terms of attendance now. They need to sell tickets, and they need to re-energize hope, not only for the fan base to come back next year, but also for the players in that locker room. This is a losing culture right now. This is a losing team for the past 4 years. And the new head coach and his staff that they hired, they haven't had a win yet. So I understand why most logical fans only care about the draft. And I think me and you basically care about that point as well. The playoffs are long gone and whatever. But looking at them, looking at what they prioritize, because that's the difference between the fans' mindset and the football operations mindset. They don't care about the draft position. They don't care about any of that. They care about establishing some type of positive culture they're going into next year. And that's ultimately why they did this.
So, maybe something you get a better read on some things with Andy Dalton, and you have a higher chance of winning games. So that's where some concern is now, John, in terms of fans, because you've gone all this way, you've lost 11 games, you're 0-11. You're set to have the number 1 pick, the pick of the litter in terms of a quarterback, or maybe Chase Young for some folks, whatever the case may be. And now back comes Dalton into the lineup. And now the Bengals could win some games and lose some draft positioning. Are you greatly concerned about that? Or is this just, hey, they're going to win 1 or 2 games and that's that?
Like, if you just look at the difference between Dalton and Finley, you would assume that, they have a better chance of winning now, and you will be right. But my thing is, what's a higher number, like 25 or 10? 25 is obviously the higher number, but 25% chance of winning isn't that much better than 10% chance of winning. You still have to look at who the Bengals have to play for the finale of this 2019 season. They play the Jets next week. They play the Browns twice. They play the Patriots, and they play the Dolphins. The Patriots are, even with an average quarterback, Tom Brady, they're still a better team, a superior team. They're probably not going to win that game. The Browns are surging right now. They have a better quarterback in Baker Mayfield. They have a better defense. They have to play on the road against them too. They're probably not going to win either of those games. So now you're thinking, okay, you just have the Dolphins and Jets left. The Jets have a surging team right now. They're 3-0 in the past 3 weeks. Sam Darnold's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in the past 3 weeks, and that defense is now top 5 in accordance to DVOA. And then finally the Dolphins, who have a better quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and that's also on the road. So looking at the rest of the schedule, it doesn't even look like that they win 3 games. So they could win 2 games. I'll give them maybe the Dolphins and Jets, maybe one of the Browns games. 2 or 3 wins, 2-14, 3-13 to finish the year when everyone else in the NFL is at least at 2 wins. I think the chances of them drafting first overall are still really high, even with Dalton in there, because the difference between Dalton and Finley may be marginal, but it may be a little bit better for Dalton's side, but it's still marginal in a sense where you're not going to get that much better performance against teams that are, for the most part, better than them. So I don't think the fact that they had this cushion forced them to make this decision. I think that was an independent variable in all this, but regardless, I don't think their chances really diminished that much as people think.
At any rate, where I kind of wanted to go next before we're going to be joined by MacGregor Wells of Gangrene Nation, I wanted to go here, okay? This may be a far-fetched scenario, but kind of piggybacking on what I just asked you with, there is a possibility that the Bengals may win some games here. And with 2 teams poised to be in the top 5 in the Jets and the Dolphins, say the Bengals win those games, maybe they win 1 or 2 against the Cleveland Browns. You get 3 or 4 wins out of these next 5. Andy Dalton plays well. He plays better than he did in those first 8 games. He shows maybe with an A.J. Green return, a Cordy Glenn return, like I said, maybe Jonah Williams. John Ross is another guy who is set to return potentially in the beginning of December. So you get some of these guys back. The run game plays at a level that it's been at for the past 3 weeks as opposed to where it was in the first 8 weeks. And all of a sudden you have a much better output, a much better looking Andy Dalton and Zach Taylor system, which net wins. Okay. Now, if you net wins, say you finish 3-13, you finish 4-12, and it moved. There are a couple of things at play here. If you end up losing draft positioning, and maybe you end up losing a shot at Joe Burrow, because we know that the Bengals do not like to move up to trade up and sacrifice picks. We know that. So if they're not getting the number 1 pick and Joe Burrow at number 1. If they're not sitting at number 1, they're probably likely not getting Joe Burrow because they're not going to move up and sacrifice picks. They don't like to do that. So if they miss out on Joe Burrow and they move back, they slide back a little bit, what is the likelihood that the Bengals select a Tua Tagovailoa, a Justin Herbert, and hang on to Andy Dalton as their starter for 2020 and use one of those 2 guys as in a red shirt year? Tagovailoa recovering from the injury. Potentially you have Justin Herbert who needs a little bit more development, and that's the route they go. You hang on to Dalton for 1 more year, see if you can kind of return to competitive football in 2020 while these guys learn and or recover.
I'm not sure if I can speak on the likelihood of that happening because this is still Zach Taylor's team. We still don't know a lot about the future plan of this organization, if there even is a plan. And I think benching Dalton in week 8 signified that, yeah, he was basically done Cincinnati for the long term. And for him to come back in the next 5 weeks, potentially play very well with an improved and healthier roster, and all of a sudden he's the back, at least in 2020 again, and at least has a chance to make something out of that season. I think that in itself is a little unlikely because I think there's some sense of type of future foresight on this whole thing. I think they still want to move on in another direction at the quarterback position, and taking Tua or Justin Herbert as that redshirt role behind Dalton would make sense because I think they look at it like now, like if they release Dalton and if they go that route, I'm not sure they would be very comfortable having Finley as the bridge guy because he can't even essentially do that. He can't pass the torch. He'll probably fumble the torch on the way over the bridge. So he's probably not a viable option at this point for that role. I think they just see him as a long-term backup in a sense and don't want him starting under any circumstances. So in that case, that does make some logical sense. It would ultimately depend on the evaluation of those 2 quarterbacks. I think they're going to like Tua a lot more than Herbert just because he's more consistent and and his decision making is overall better. He might just be the better prospect. And we just talked about it last week, how they would be very, unattracted to the idea of taking a guy in the first round who probably isn't going to play or at least play at a high level in 2020. So maybe that deters him from Tua and deters him from this whole plan. But if they miss out on a chance like Burrow, or on a guy like Burrow, and miss out on that chance to get that franchise quarterback, that does make a lot of sense. But only if, like you said, all those positive things happen in the final 5 weeks. And as we've seen from the first, 11 weeks, it's kind of unlikely it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a far-fetched scenario that I'm proposing, but it's a scenario where, Dalton's going to play pissed off, for lack of better words. He's got a chip on his shoulder. There are, like I said, there are pieces returning. The Dalton plan, surround him with pieces. Some of those guys are returning. And, obviously more games in the Zach Taylor system. These coaches have been, at least in the run game aspect, have shown a propensity to change things up and at least be a bit more effective there. So finding a semblance of balance could bring about more wins and more effective play by Andy Dalton. We'll see what that leads to. I think if the Bengals, continue to lose games and, if they get the number 1 overall pick, Burrow's the guy. I think it's a little bit of a far-fetched scenario where they win 3, 4, 5 games in these remaining 5 weeks. But if they do, I just think it gives them, a bit of something to think about. And especially if they lose draft positioning. Before we get to our special guest here, John, real quickly, do you have any inkling that this is maybe something to showcase Dalton for a possible spring trade by putting him back in the lineup?
Absolutely, yes. I think that's an alternative motive here. Like right now, Dalton's value was extremely low, and this obviously raises it a little bit. And at some point, you just got to say, we'll just take anything that anybody can give us. And who knows what his value was at the trade deadline? But obviously, once he was benched, it diminished. It's because everybody knew he was going to be out the door. If he does show something positive, and there's been rumblings about how this quarterback carousel is going to be extremely, radical this offseason with a lot of other quarterbacks on the move. So if they can get some positive assets out of this last 5 weeks, that's definitely a win for them. And I think that was also something that was in the decision, along with just trying to get a win.
Yep. Well, Dalton is the starting quarterback, and he will be playing against the Jets. And it sounds like for the rest of the season. And it sounds like Zach Taylor made this decision. He consulted with ownership, but he basically proposed the fact that he was going to make this move, and ownership gave its blessing to move back to Andy Dalton. And that's where we're at with things as week 13 is around the corner. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sharon. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're going to bring in our special guest in just a second here. But as I said at the onset of the show, you can get this program on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify. You can get it on Google Play. You can get it on iHeartRadio, the Megaphone platform, YouTube, and all of our stuff is on CincyJungle.com. So, to help us preview week 13 against the New York Jets, we have MacGregor Wells of SB Nation's Gangrene Nation. MacGregor, can you hear us? How are you, sir?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. How you doing?
Great. Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you making the time. I know it's probably a little late on your end, but we appreciate it, especially during the holiday season here. Hopefully you're setting yourself up to do something fun tomorrow. But just let's get right to it. I'm a Southern California guy. I watched a lot of Sam Darnold. I really liked him coming out as a prospect. I liked him better than Baker Mayfield. Both guys have struggled a bit in their second year, but Darnold's done a few nice things these past couple of weeks. What's your assessment of him so far for the New York Jets?
I think he's really come into his own the last few weeks. He struggled a lot early in the season, and I think a lot of that was due to the fact that the Jets kind of played a murderer's row of pass defenses that really gave him a lot of trouble, as well as his problems with mononucleosis earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And that's an unusual thing for someone in their 20s to get, but whatever. Anyway, I think he was probably a little bit under the weather when he came back as well. That tends not to clear up as fast as he came back. So who knows? It's hard to say, but I think as he's gotten to the easier part of the schedule, he's really come into his own, and we'll see as the season comes on. Later in the season there'll be some really tough defenses again, and we'll see if he can handle those. But the last few weeks he's been terrific. Well,
speaking of tough defenses, the Jets have a pretty good one in their own, but I'm just very curious. Over or under 25 yards, the safeties for the Jets are playing behind the line of scrimmage of Greg Williams as defensive coordinator.
There'll be one really deep safety usually, but not both. Both of them are not best 25 yards. Yeah, one is usually off the television.
Yeah, I just remember the Jabril Peppers was always like 50 yards away from the line. But yeah, has Greg really turned that defense around? Has he shown a better capacity to lead them because they've been kind of on a hot stretch lately?
He's done an amazing job. I mean, the Jets' problems have not been on defense at all, and the Jets' defense has kind of been decimated with injuries. They're down to their fifth string inside linebackers, and they've had injuries along the defensive line as well, and a cornerback. Both their top two cornerbacks are down. They're gone for the year. Well, one's gone for the year. One's will come back maybe this week, maybe not. But they've been gone for a while. So we're operating with backup cornerbacks, backup interior linebackers, and still the defense has been terrific, especially the run defense, which is the best in the league.
So MacGregor, the Jets were, I mean, they made the big splash this offseason in free agency, right? I mean, they got the linebacker from the Ravens. They got Le'Veon Bell. They made some moves, and it hasn't really worked out for them. From the other side of the fence, the Bengals side of the fence, a team that does basically nothing in outside free agency. What's your take on the effectiveness of that strategy? I know Mosley's been hurt. Are fans still wanting more of that outside free agency approach, or is it this simply isn't working? We really need to refocus efforts on the draft. We need to do better in April rather than March.
Well, I think here's the thing: the Jets had a GM that really didn't work out at all, and Mike McCagnon that they fired last year, and he had a series of terrible drafts. And when you have one terrible draft after another, you really don't have anybody to bring back internally. So you have no choice. You have all this money because you didn't have anybody to sign to second contracts, and you have to go into free agency and spend it. Now, I don't think it's the ideal solution. I don't think it's a good solution. It's just the necessary solution when you have nobody internally that can fill any kind of starter role. So the Jets have been forced by terrible drafts to go outside to free agency, and that rarely works well. You always are paying a ton of money for guys that probably are not going to ever measure up to those contracts, And that's what happened with the Jets, and it'll happen to most teams when they do this. Occasionally, a team will build well at least for a year or two from free agency, but it's no way to run a team. The bottom line is it's got to be through the draft. You've got to draft well. The Jets have been amongst the worst in the NFL in drafting.
Speaking of the draft, you guys selected Quinnen Williams as your first-round pick, and you traded Leonard Williams, surprisingly, for a couple of mid-round picks, but presumably that would have given Quinnen a bigger role in that defense. How has he really looked in his first year?
There's mixed reviews of Quinnen Williams. He's not been the disruptive, penetrating force that a lot of people expected. He certainly has not been effective in the pass rush. But it appears when you watch the defense play and you key in on Quinnen, they're asking him to two-gap a lot. And so he's not being asked to do the things he did in college. And so he's not racking up the stats, but he seems to be progressing fairly nicely. Eventually, you're going to want him to play more of and I'm not saying it's going to be this good, but more of an Aaron Donald type role where you're penetrating. Nobody's going to be that good, but that sort of role. And right now he doesn't play that role. Right now they're asking him to play sort of a traditional two-gap, nose tackle. Those guys don't rack up stats. That's what he's being asked to do. And he's doing a good job in the run game. He's doing a good job in what he's asked to do. He's just not flashing off because of the role he's being asked to play, I think.
Talking with MacGregor Wells of Gangrene Nation, the SB Nation website that covers the New York Jets. The Bengals play the Jets in Week 13. I want to talk a little bit, while we've got you for a few more minutes, about the Kelechi Osemele situation. That is kind of another free agency, I guess, disaster. But the other side of it is the whole medical staff issue, how they handled that. I think those of us who cover the Bengals, watch the Bengals, hear about the Bengals, know quite a bit about medical staff issues, training staff issues, injury issues. I guess what happened there, if you have any other further insight, and how big of a distraction and or deterrent has that been to the Jets' success?
I don't have any insight as far as insider information for the Jets. All I can tell you is that Osemele didn't work out. He was basically being replaced. He was benched. And as soon as he was benched, he said, I need surgery on the shoulder, and I've needed it for quite a while. it's a kind of an interesting timing in that he didn't say that when he was starting. He said that when he was no longer going to play. So from the Jets' perspective, he was playing all this time, and now he's being benched. Now he says he needs the surgery, and they're saying, "But you played all this time. You probably, if you needed it now, you probably needed it then because he had this shoulder problem right from the beginning of the season." So from the Jets' perspective, he just did that because basically he was ticked off of being benched and he wanted to make it. But from his perspective, I guess, look, nobody knows person's pain. Nobody knows how they're feeling from one week to the next. I can't tell you whether he's really worse off now than he was before he was benched. He feels like he was treated poorly by the Jets. He feels like he needs the surgery, and the Jets are saying you can't have surgery that you need. So from his perspective, what the heck is that? I need the surgery. You tell me I can't have it. I'm going to get it anyway. So the Jets have not handled these kinds of situations well this year internally. It's not the only situation where you're scratching your head like, this doesn't usually happen in the NFL. And you're like, what is going on internally? There's some kind of disconnect between certain players and the new team that's been brought in this year between Adam Gase and Joe Douglas, the GM. And it's hard to tell who's to blame here. I don't know. I'm not taking sides in this, but something is wrong. Something is not going the way it should be going internally on this team.
Well, speaking of Adam Gase, in his first year, he hasn't exactly created the most positive perception, but there was announcements a couple weeks ago about how, the ownership was confident in him going into next year, and he's not going to be, a one and done guy. And I don't think Zach Taylor is also going to be that, but it's kind of interesting how both first-year coaches who have struggled mightily are facing each other, but both are probably going to be back. So as a Jets fan, how do you, spin bringing Adam Gase back to the second year in a positive way? What are the things that you can build off with Adam Gase as your head coach?
I'm not a fan of bringing him back. I didn't think he should be back. But if you're going to say, how do you spin it? The last few weeks, the offense has been terrific. They've scored 34 points 3 weeks in a row. Sam Darnold seems to be progressing nicely. He's gone from bottom of the league quarterback to somebody who's really put together some really terrific games lately. So from that perspective, your most important player on the team by far is the quarterback. If you can get that quarterback up to speed where he's now a force in the league, and if you're going to say Adam Gase is the one doing that, well, that's a really good reason to bring him back. I'm not so sure it's Adam Gase. I think it's more Sam Darnold. But if you believe Adam Gase is the one responsible for that, then that's a great reason to bring him back.
So how do you see this one playing out this week? Is this a trap game for the Jets? What can the Bengals potentially exploit in this game? Or do you think that the Jets are catching kind of that late season surge, hitting their stride a little bit, like you've mentioned, and that this should just kind of be another notch in their belt this week?
I don't think a Jets team can ever say any team is a notch in their belt. This is not a good team. This is a team that has feasted on a few weak opponents and a couple of opponents that overlook them. If the Jets go to this as a trap game, if they come in flat, that's a real mark against Coach Adam Gase. You cannot go on any road game in the NFL and say we're going to notch this as a win, unless you're the Patriots. You can, but at most teams, road games are tough to win. I don't care who you're playing; it's tough to win on the road. Do I look at this as a trap game? I sure hope not. I mean, if the Jets aren't ready to play this game, it'll be a travesty. The Bengals will beat them because I don't think the Jets are a ton better than the Bengals. I think they're probably a better team, but I don't think the gap is all that wide.
We've been talking with MacGregor Wells of Gang Green Nation. MacGregor, where can people, aside from the website itself, where can people find your work, get in touch with you, read your stuff, all that good stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm kind of a throwback. I'm a dinosaur. I'm not on any social media.
Okay.
So the website is at ganggreennation.com. You can read my stuff there anytime you like. But yeah, I'm not a Twitter guy. I'm not a Facebook guy. Just don't do that stuff. So.
That's all right. That's all right. Any big plans for Thanksgiving?
I'm cooking. I'm the cook. I'm cooking king crab legs, and I'm cooking sirloin steaks, and we're gonna have a great time. How about you guys?
Well, I'm waiting for an invitation to your place.
Yeah,
come
exactly.
on up. But Southern California is a long ride for just one good meal, right?
Yeah, just kind of doing the family thing myself.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, and have a good holiday. Enjoy this weekend, the extended weekend, the football, and appreciate your insight. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take it easy.
That
was MacGregor Wells of Gang Green Nation, SB Nation's Jets site. Go check out their website as the Bengals get set to take on the Jets in Week 13. Interesting stuff from him, John. I thought there's some good insight, and it's I thought it was interesting what he said about about Adam Gase. It sounds like that fuse is already very short amongst the fan base, and I don't know if Bengals fans, the majority of them, I don't know if they feel that way or not. But
well, Taylor doesn't come off as like a meme as much as Adam Gase does. Gase makes it very easier, I think, for people to despise him. Plus, he's in New York, so he's going to have a lot more critics in comparison.
A look over the other side of the fence there with the Jets. Not a team that the Bengals play overly often, but I guess somewhat often, conference opponent. And what's interesting, John, both of these teams are set to kind of hold a top 5 pick. We mentioned this earlier. So this game, at least for those who are into the tank fest, this game kind of holds a little bit of weight, right?
No, I mean, like, you just look at the rest of the games remaining. Like, this is one of those games where you think this is winnable because the Jets are potentially fraudulent based off the past 2 weeks, and they can just implode at any minute. And their head coach is Adam Gase, and it's at home. And I don't think Andy Dalton's ever lost to this team. And it's against a defense. It's against a style of defense that at least most Bengals players on offense are familiar with playing in that Greg Williams defense. And it's a defense that doesn't have a lot of star power. They obviously have Jamal Adams and Marcus May, but they traded Leonard Williams. And I think Jordan Willis, out of all people, is like their second highest graded edge defender on that defensive line. So yeah, Jordan Willis not only plays for the Jets, but he's actually a decent player for them. So it kind of speaks to the testament of the overall depth. But Williams is getting that unit to play a lot better as a team, and I think they've only given up 20 points the past couple of weeks, and they just demolished the Raiders, who beat the Bengals pretty handily or 2 weeks ago, or at least towards the end of the game. So like, this is a game where if Darnold really just pops off, then the Bengals don't really have a chance, because even with Dalton back, I don't think their offense is going to be able to keep up with him. And this is a defense that has the capability of just slowing down whatever this offense is shown to be. So this is the Jets are winnable in a sense of the very definition of just playing a 4-win team, but they have the chance to either, blow them out by multiple scores or just underwhelm them completely enough to keep this another close game.
Yeah, and we were thinking about asking him about what the Jets may do if they hold a top 5 pick, if quarterback would be in there. But given his kind of review of Sam Darnold, I kind of figure, and I think most people figure, that quarterback probably, with Sam Darnold only entering year 3, if they have a top 5 pick, I don't think that would be the route they would go. Maybe offensive line or something like that.
Yeah.
But, so I don't think they're a threat to take one of those big 3 away from Cincinnati if they happen to leapfrog Cincinnati in terms of draft positioning. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. You just heard from MacGregor Wells of Gangrene Nation to help us talk about the Jets game. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. Get this podcast on basically any audio platform where you get your podcast. It's available a lot of different places. It's available on YouTube and on cincyjungle.com. We thank those of you joining us live, whether that's through our YouTube channel or Cincy Jungle's Facebook page. Appreciate it. We know it's Thanksgiving holiday is upon us, so you may be traveling, you may be, I don't know, but we appreciate you listening to us, and in advance, we're not getting out of here yet, but in advance, we hope that you have a good Thanksgiving holiday.
Dude, I know I'm still sick because I just realized I didn't answer any part of what question you asked. I just went on a completely different tangent. I don't know what that was.
That's all right. You got tryptophan on the brain, dude.
Oh my God.
It's all good. Let's segue, John, into the NFL draft. As I said at the onset, the Cincinnati Bengals and their fans probably mostly have the NFL draft mostly to look forward to. So yes, we've been talking a lot about the quarterbacks, and yes, we will get to the quarterbacks. We're not going to kick off the segment with that this week, just so you know, so all you listeners know. On the December 11th episode, we have Joseph Yoon from Addicted to Quack. That's like the best.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I love that website name. The SB Nation Oregon Ducks website. He is going to be joining us then to talk about Justin Herbert, maybe a couple of other prospects as well. So he's going to help us kind of move this segment along. We also have Billy Gomila from the LSU SB Nation website. He should be joining us next week. By the way, our show next week will be next Tuesday night, not Wednesday night, the 3rd. So join us. If you're a live listener, join us for that. Billy Gomila is tentatively set to join us that evening, as is it's Brent Taylor from the Alabama website to talk about Tua Tagovailoa. So for the next couple of weeks after tonight, the next couple of shows, we will be talking quarterbacks, and we'll be talking with them from people that watch them on a weekly basis and pretty much all of their snaps. So we're going to get some good insight there on the prospect watch list. But this week, we're going to kind of kick off with some guys that a little lesser known, at least on my end, that either position wise, need, whatever the case may be, they might be guys that the Bengals could target, not necessarily in the first round, but in later rounds. And since I am a Southern California guy, and since I watch a lot of USC football, I'm going to start with a USC prospect. And this prospect is wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr., his father was a running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a number of years. And this kid, Michael Pittman, was a very effective. He was kind of a reserve guy, kind of got some starts throughout his career. But his son, Michael Pittman Jr., is a wide receiver for the USC Trojans. He's got another son, Micah Pittman, who plays for Oregon as well. But Michael Pittman Jr. is set to leave. There are conflicting kind of reports on where Pittman may go. Some people think he could be as high as a second or third round guy. Some people think he's going to be a day 3 pick. Here's kind of the deal with him. He is absolutely huge, 6'4", 220. He runs vertically pretty well. It's going to be interesting to see what his 40 time is, because if his 40 time ends up being a good time to match with those kind of, the 6'4", 220 frame, that's going to skyrocket his draft stock. Where he excels, John, is high pointing the football. He does make the big play. He's not an overly fast guy, but he's pretty fast for his size. He's made the last 2 seasons combined. Granted, USC is going to have probably a bowl game here, so he still has at least a game to play here. But in 22 games the last 2 years, he has 17 touchdowns scored. And that, for those who do not know about the USC Trojans, they've had a carousel of quarterbacks that have come in and out of the lineup because of injury and ineffectiveness and all kinds of things since Sam Darnold left. So as a junior, Pittman had 41 catches, 758 yards for a big 18.5 yards per catch average and 6 touchdowns. This year, a big jump in statistics as their go-to guy, 95 catches, 1,222 yards, and 11 touchdowns. The yards per catch average dropped to 12.9, but effective guy. So I know you hate to do comparables, NFL comparables, John. I'm not a big fan of them either, because you throw something out there and you think it's a compliment. Some people don't take it as such, what have you. But I see this kid as a quicker Auden Tate. I see him as maybe a bit more athletic Auden Tate, with the size, the catch radius, and can do a few more things vertically. He's an inch smaller, but he's got the big body, the big frame. He is a big red zone target. He's a guy, like I said, he'll high point the ball. He can go deep. He can move the chains a little bit. I think he may run a bit slower. So I think that's why a lot of people think he's going to be a mid-round pick. He may be in that 4.6-ish range, which isn't terrible for 6'4", 220. But, when you see a DK Metcalf around a similar stature go, what is that, sub 4.4, the expectations can be a little bit different there. I think he does some of the similar things that DK Metcalf does. He's not the absolute physical specimen that Metcalf is, but this kid is built I think he could be a good complementary receiver on an NFL team. I look at like an Alshon Jeffrey. I look at, like I said, Auden Tate. I look at guys like that where, he could be a guy that slot guy, maybe occasionally put him outside for the occasional deep ball, but a good red zone target in the NFL. That's how I see Michael Pittman Jr. I don't think he lasts personally past the third round. Definitely not past the fourth round, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, quicker Auden Tates usually don't last that long because really quick Auden Tate is like a Calvin Johnson. But I don't think you think he's that quick. So
no, he's not.
No, that guy and his skill set definitely has value. That's a good one. Usually I don't watch too much college tape this early, and I usually have people who are better than some positions for that to do that for me. One of my favorite followers on Twitter and one of my friends on Twitter who does a lot of offensive line work. His name's Ryan Patrick at Royal Red Legs. He does a lot of offensive line watching in general. And the name that he told me last week was a guy named Sam Cosme from Texas. Now he's a redshirt sophomore. He's the offensive lineman, so he might not declare it this year. But there have been, some cases where guys kind of leave early because, they start a lot and they have a lot of experience and, they just want to get to the NFL as quick as possible. Maybe they don't like the role. That could potentially be a case for Cosme because, as we've seen, Texas is not back. They're like 7-4 or 6-5 at this point. So maybe he wants to bounce early. But regardless, in general, when scouting offensive linemen, most guys can move guys from point A to point B, but the truly great guys, the guys who can develop better, can actually develop into quality players, they know how to expand upon that. They learn technical hand placement, they learn, better footwork. And Cosme, again, he's a redshirt sophomore, so he's really young, but he already has a lot of functional strength. He already has the ability to drive guys off the ball, and he's 6'6", 6'7", about 300 pounds, so he's got incredible size. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, we just drafted Michael Jordan, who's 6'6", and he's been crappy at guard. But, not all guys are obviously play the same despite the size. He knows how to gain leverage. He knows how to play with good pad level. He played at right tackle his redshirt freshman year, started all season. Then he moved to the left side here. But he's a guy that could potentially have a future inside. And Ryan's comparison to him was Andrus Peat. Andrus Peat was a guy from Stanford, drafted back in 2015, I think, in the first round. A guy that the Bengals might have drafted had he been available for them instead of Cedric Ogbuehi. But Pete also had really heavy feet at Stanford, right? His pass protection skill set could not survive in the NFL. The Saints knew that. They moved him inside the guard, and he's been an absolute mauler. He's been a guy that, despite not the greatest fit in his zone blocking scheme, he knows how to just, get good leverage at 6'6", 6'5", and just really just use those tree trunk of legs to just drive guys off the ball. So I think Cosme is another sense of that guy where he plays a lot of functional strength. He plays a great leverage, great pad level. And honestly, for a guy who's only maybe 20, 21 years old, great hand placement. He's just the guy that understands the developmental factors of becoming a great offensive lineman at a really young age at a program like Texas. He might even be better than Connor Williams, who was drafted in the mid-second round from 2018. So, coming from that program, they obviously had luck with Trey Hopkins as well. A guy who could potentially be a versatile, competent component out on the offensive line. He might not declare, so this is why we're kind of saying it now, is just get him out of the way early. So if he does declare, and maybe he kind of overshot what his expectations were as far as draft stock, they could get him maybe potentially later in the draft, like the 4th or 5th round range, kind of where some of those guys who really overvalue themselves really go. But in terms of a value pick, in terms of a guy who can play to multiple positions, who's already started well over 20 games in just 2 years of college at a major program, this is the guy that could potentially be a value piece for years to come.
And you think even though he could be a day 3 pick, you think he has starter upside?
Yeah, like maybe not right away because again he's only been a 2-year starter in college, but after just watching some of it myself, I think a lot of what my friend Ryan said was extremely valid, and how he just has those traits that are kind of rare because every guy, especially playing in the Big 12 against those defenses, they have the ability to flash, but the consistency is definitely there. So if he does go, it could be like it's the offensive lineman from Arkansas, not Frank Ragnow, Ragnow's teammate, who was drafted by the Patriots, who was drafted on day 3. He ended up actually starting or getting a lot of starting looks early, but I think he got hurt. He just has, those guys can find opportunities even on good offensive lines. So on an offensive line as bad as Cincinnati, the opportunities are going to be there, especially for a coaching staff that is looking for the best possible option. So if he does find himself on a team like Cincinnati, even as a day 3 pick, he's going to have opportunities. But again, he could go back to college. He could become a better player. He may even be like a day 2 or maybe even a first round pick in the 2021 draft. But that's just a name to watch when you see guys declaring for the draft.
Steve Hawley in the live Facebook chat. I assume this is directed to you and Cosme, the kid you're referencing. Would you stay if you were him? Do you think he needs to stay, or do you think he's NFL ready after this year?
I haven't watched enough to really say that, but if I were him, like it's Texas, I really don't know what you're saying for. I guess that quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, has a decision to make for himself if he's going to declare or not, or maybe he's a senior. I have no idea. But if I were him, I would probably get out of Texas as soon as possible if I have a chance to get an NFL contract.
Okay. There are a lot of people asking us about various players, and I saw Austin Tran ask us about Kenneth Murray. I saw Will Smith talk about Josh Jones, the tackle. Because of time constraints and whatnot, we're not going to get to all of those guys, but you're giving us ideas of who to talk about in the future. We're going to be doing this for quite a while. So, some of the guys we talked about today aren't of the highest profile. You've heard of them, but they aren't going in the first round. They're guys that are more depth guys or guys that help you build the meat of your roster, not necessarily the flashy, your quarterbacks and whatnot. But as I said, we will be talking about the quarterbacks in the next couple of weeks, courtesy of some folks from various SB Nation websites to help us cover Joe Burrow, to help us cover Tua, to help us cover Justin Herbert, the big 3 in this class. We'll probably get some others, some other quarterbacks and whatnot too. So we've got a lot to get to on this front. I just going back to my guy Pittman that I covered. From the Bengals standpoint, wide receiver isn't their biggest need. You've got a number of guys. They've used high picks, but all of a sudden you don't know what's going on with AJ Green and what happens next year. John Ross has been injuries. Auden Tate, he's been pretty good when called upon, but I don't know if he's a number 1 guy, and he kind of has been banged up a tiny bit. Alex Erickson, so I mean there's guys, and then obviously injuries have hit that position group pretty heavily. So that's kind of why I think wide receiver probably needs to be. I mean, yes, offensive line, yes, quarterback, yes, linebacker, but I think wide receiver is probably in the discussion in those middle rounds. So that's why I think a guy like Pittman could be in the discussion for the Bengals. Obviously, I think with Cosme, the need is for an offensive lineman is higher. So that I would assume, John, that's why you you kicked it off with him.
Yeah, Jason Von Stein in the comment section. Let's redraft Anthony Munoz just to make a point.
Yeah, well,
might as well.
Yeah, he announces the picks, so give him a card that says his own name on him.
The pick is me.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. I look forward to covering more players with you. And if you have ideas, or if you want some breakdowns of players that you guys want us to talk about, let us know. Tip us off to those. Get in contact with us and let us know. Hey, talk about this guy in the near future, and we'll try and get to as many as possible because. This is an important draft for the Bengals. This is an important draft coming up. They have high picks, and if they are to keep Zach Taylor and company, they're going to need to hit well and hit on a high rate of picks in this year's draft. So, we're going to talk about these going forward, and we're pretty excited about it. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We have had a jam-packed episode. We've talked Andy Dalton and the loss to the Steelers. We've previewed the Jets with MacGregor Wells of Gangrene Nation, the SB Nation Jets site. And we've given you a couple prospects to chew on as the draft is around the corner. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as we get close to Thanksgiving. As I mentioned, you can get this show in a number of different platforms, audio platforms. Get it how you get your podcasts. And if you like the video stuff, you can get it on Cincy Jungle and YouTube. John, we're going to get out of here. Thanksgiving's here, man. And then before we know it's Christmas, and then before we know it's free agency and the draft in 2020. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, my man?
Love yourself this Thanksgiving. Stay away from the cranberry sauce. I'm telling you, just stay away.
Oh,
Don't touch that stuff. Don't touch that stuff.
You had me for 54 minutes, dude.
Are you serious?
So as a kid, I hated the stuff. Later in life, a great aunt of mine, who, God bless her, she's 94 years old, still scooting around. She makes the most bomb from scratch cranberry sauce, and it literally took me about 4 years ago or 5 years ago to finally come around on it. Now, not the Jell-O with the fruit inside, like the actual cranberry sauce, like, you know.
That's the whole thing, is it not? You just eat the sauce?
Yeah. Well, not the Jell-O mold thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Like the entire facade of it.
Yeah, that I can't get into. But there's actual like I don't know. Some people do it differently, man. Some people.
So when I turn
about cranberry, it's different stuff. Yes. So your palate changes, my friend.
Well, when in 10 years, when I'm like 32, I'm gonna like this. I'm gonna like this stuff. Is what you're saying?
Give it a decade. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Give it a decade, and you'll come around. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
I'm going across the river to Kentucky to my aunt's house, where my entire family will be, and hopefully gained about 5 pounds worth of food. So that's none of it cranberry sauce.
Nice. Bring Randall. Have him gain some weight.
Yeah, he needs it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm glad you've got some of this stuff sorted out, man. God, what a week for you. Feel bad for you.
Well, we'll get through it.
Yeah.
We'll get through it.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you joining us. Appreciate all the live listeners joining us as well. I don't really have final thoughts other than to say have a great Thanksgiving. Listen to our show. We got Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk also on tap for coming for this holiday weekend. You've got Orange is the New Black, the podcast from Zim Hude and Ace Boogie. So check that out as well. We're trying to get you multiple shows per week. We're going to do listener questions this weekend as well, or at least I will. So join us for that. Probably, I'm thinking Friday, but we'll see how that works out. And then, of course, we'll do post-game reactions on Sunday after the game. So check those out. Download it. Leave us a review. Appreciate the support, and we will see you on the next show. Happy Thanksgiving.